"12 game consoles that are severely underrated." What do you call a great console? Is it one that gets your adrenaline high every time you touch the controller? Or is it simply something that offers precision in terms of control? We feel that a good gaming console is one that has left behind some happy memories for us over the years. We still remember a particularly difficult boss fight or one stage that gave us sleepless nights. The functionality of the system, the design, and the effectiveness of the controls undoubtedly play a major role when it comes to grading it. All you hardcore gamers have probably enjoyed an obscene number of consoles in your life. With time, new generations come up, and the old ones fade away. We all love the good old days of the Sega Genesis, the SNES, PlayStation, and the NES. However, there are some that leave behind a fond remembrance, and many of these fine consoles are criminally underrated, simply because of their lack of popularity during that time. In this video, we have compiled a list of such underrated gems that made gaming beautiful and deserves a tribute.
Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
The NEO-GEO. The NEO-GEO was a cartridge-based arcade system board that was developed by a Japanese game company called the SNK Corporation. It was a 4th-generation home video game console, and it was marketed as a 24-bit machine. They initially came up with a coin-operated arcade machine, and the owners could put 6 different cartridges in a single cabinet. Soon, a home console version was also on offer, and it had the same raw specs as the multi-video variant. Thus, it provided a true arcade experience for home users. If you're wondering why such a perfect console did not become a commercial success, it was only because of the exorbitant pricing. This device was ridiculously expensive and was consequently beyond the reach of most gamers. The price was somewhat justified because it offered many of the same components that you could find in an arcade cabinet. It was far better than anything else in the market at that point, but the high price tag became the sole burden that the console had to carry.
If you're a NEO-GEO fan, maybe an arcade fan, it's a really cool thing to have.
SNK realized the demand for such a system, but misunderstood the true size of the market. The NEO-GEO MVS model still sold some consoles because of the compact size and 6 ROM slots, but the AES was affected by very low sales. There were some fascinating games that were released for the platform. Some like Art of Fighting, Samurai Showdown, World Heroes, and Fatal Fury deserve a special mention. Visually, this console can be enjoyed even today, and it is a pity that such brilliance went unnoticed. The DREAMCAST. The DREAMCAST was released by Sega, and this home video game console was indeed a fine machine. It was the final home console for Sega and marked 18 long years for the company in the market. The refinement is obvious, and the years of experience went on to make the first console that included a built-in modular modem for online gaming and internet support. Initially, it was hailed as an amazing console, but soon, Sony built up hype around the upcoming PlayStation 2. Even the price cuts on offer didn't help, and eventually, Sega discontinued it.
Now, before we take a deep dive into the Dreamcast's hardware, let's have a quick look at the context.
The Sega Dreamcast is probably among the most underrated consoles on this list. It was a device that was way ahead of its time, as it was the first console to offer some kind of online gaming experience. It had a controller that featured motion controls and a screen. The high-quality ports that they used from Sega's Naomi arcade system board were a treat to use. The best part about Dreamcast was the variety in the games, and it even offered the definitive versions of some multi-platform titles. There were some amazing exclusives as well, like Shenmue, which was almost a pioneer in the open-world genre. Jet Set Radio was another such name that popularized the use of cel-shaded graphics. Other innovative titles included Crazy Taxi and Phantasy Star Online. It certainly deserves a lot of respect for the things it could accomplish so early in the day. The PS Vita. This handheld video game console was developed by Sony Computer Entertainment, and it was only in 2012 that it was up for sale in the US and Europe. It was a successor to the PlayStation Portable, and this 8th generation video game console was a great catch for gamers. The design was such that it fused the experience of a big-budget video game platform along with that of mobile gaming on smartphones. It came with a 5-inch touchscreen device and 2 analog joysticks. The PS Vita supported Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and even had an optional 3G.
The PlayStation Vita inspires new ways to game.
The PSP was a great grand success, but unfortunately, its successor couldn't enjoy the same status despite being a superior machine. The PS Vita was more powerful than the machine Nintendo offered during this time, and there were some amazing exclusive games that were worth playing. We loved the features like remote play and cross-platform purchasing, unthinkable for the players back then. It did have some luck selling in its native Japan, but the same cannot be said about its sales figures in North America. The problem cropped up when after a few years, the hardware and the big budget games stalled. This affected the diversity in the library available. Despite a loyal fan base, it was a commercial failure. And maybe it had something to do with the fact that mobile phones were already available as a cheaper gaming alternative. NEO-GEO Pocket Color. The NEO-GEO Pocket Color was a handheld video game console developed by SNK, and it was intended to be a successor to the NEO-GEO Pocket, which released a year earlier. This 16-bit system came with an arcade-style micro-switch joystick, and it was pretty accurate for fighting-based games. It also possessed a commendable 40-hour battery life and robust build quality. It is rather tragic that the NEO-GEO Pocket Color became the last video game console by SNK. What is even sadder is the fact that it didn't quite get the love that it deserved. Nintendo's portable machines were going great guns during this time, and somehow this one took a back seat. The reduced popularity was also due to the anticipation in the market for the 32-bit Game Boy Advance and the popularity of Nintendo's Pokemon franchise. The NEO-GEO Pocket Color was a cool and handy console that you could pull out anywhere and have a fun time. We loved the simple setup of this one, and the game lineup was a dream. It had everything from card battling games to fighters. Some of the best games for the Pocket Color were Sonic the Hedgehog Pocket Adventure, The Last Blade, King of Fighters R2, and Bust-A-Move Pocket. If you can get your hands on this, we promise a rewarding experience, especially with the relaxing clicking noise to keep you going. TurboGrafx 16. If you are not from the US, you probably know this console as the PC Engine. This 4th generation home video game console was designed by Hudson Soft, and it was one of the first to be marketed in the 16-bit era. The TurboGrafx 16 boasted an 8-bit CPU and a 16-bit video color encoder. The 8-bit CPU made many people question the marketing trick of selling it as a 16-bit device, and this was thought to be deceptive. Although it was very successful in Japan, the sales faltered badly in the US and Europe.
Of what's coming.
This 16-bit system suffered greatly from the lack of proper marketing strategies, and Nintendo's third-party strong-arm tactics also affected the sales. The developers delayed the US release such that it had to compete with the likes of the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo Entertainment System. The ruthless competition got the better of this fine console, and it wasn't as successful as it should have been. When this console was launched, we were impressed by the cool platforming games and pinball titles. It had a brilliant CD sound, and the graphics were impressive as well. The controller, however, was somewhat outdated, and the library was not quite up to the mark. It did have some cool games though, including 2 of the finest Bombermans, Bonk's Adventure, Alien Crush, Keith Courage and Alpha Zones, and more. Some of the popular games of this console eventually became some of the most downloaded titles on the Wii's Virtual Console. Sega Saturn. Sega Genesis proved to be a commercial success, and Sega Saturn was the successor to this console. This home video game console was released in 1995, and it had a dual CPU design with 8 processors. The CPU was developed by a popular electronics company named Hitachi, and they did a fabulous job with the device. The games were available in CD-ROM format, and the game library was quite extensive with arcade games and original titles. You might be wondering why such a fine console ended up being underrated. Well, the answer is the first PlayStation launched by Sony during this time. It became a widely popular device, and Sega's 32-bit baby found the competition a bit too rough to handle. The Nintendo 64 that came up in 1996 also grabbed a major market share, depriving this console. Also, while the arcade background came in handy, the complexity of the system was certainly a major weakness. The failure to continue with the Sonic the Hedgehog series added to the factors of its downfall. While the Sega Saturn might have died an unfortunate death, there are some really cool games that it had to offer. You must try out some classics, namely X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Panzer Dragoon Saga, and Guardian Heroes.
Open the box. It comes with 2 wireless controllers.
Sega CD. This was part of the 4th generation of video game consoles, and Sega developed this as a CD-ROM accessory that could play CD-based games. The device could also play audio CDs and CDG discs, meaning it was capable of a much greater storage. This gave it the ability to handle full-motion video games, spurring their popularity. One of these games, called Night Trap, caused a lot of controversies. Sega CD had a fast and smooth central processing unit, and the graphic enhancements were a big boost as well. This console was released in 1988, and Sega had an aggressive plan for the American market. They thought of cutting down on the price and decided to develop games that would appeal to American users. They even had advertising campaigns and catered to the changing times by introducing the CD as the storage medium. However, the price was still pretty high because they had to modify the CPU. The previous Motorola 68000 CPU was a bit too slow, and an additional 68000 CPU was added to the system. The marketing experts at Sega felt that gamers would be willing to pay good money for such an impeccable console. But perhaps they had misread the customers. There were systematic issues when they took too long to release software development kits, and the third-party development of games suffered due to this. There were about 200 games created by Sega and other third-party publishers. Some of the finest ones were Lunar, The Silver Star, Sonic CD, Popful Mail, and Snatcher. While many thought very highly of this console, there were some who felt that it was nothing more than a big memory device that enabled CD sound. It came in pretty late in the 16-bit life cycle, and the pricing was too expensive. Another big blow to their reputation came with the news that the system had a poor customer support system, which was quite irritating.
Oh yes! Good back! Oh yes! Yes!
Atari Lynx, its portable system. This was the world's first handheld electronic gaming device with a color LCD. This portable system was developed by Atari Corporation, and as an 8 to 16-bit console, it was a convenient option for gamers. The ambidextrous layout was a unique experience, and the advanced graphics ensured a visual delight for those using it. The ComLink system allowed it to network with up to 15 other units. While the initial sales figures were quite high, it could never match up to the popularity of the Game Boy, which sold over 16 million units, was hardier, cost less, had a longer battery life, and enjoyed a superior software library. While it did lose the race to the Game Boy, it was a terrific console that had the perfect design as well. The chunky build made it easy for gamers to grab onto it, and the controls were smooth enough for uninterrupted gaming. There were some fun exclusives that you could enjoy as well, and we loved Tetris, which was the first Lynx game that could be saved while playing. Other games like Batman Returns, Baseball Heroes, and Blockout were pretty engaging, and you could go on playing without worrying about the battery. Atari could have been the next big thing, but with time, they went bankrupt, and it destroyed the American console industry temporarily.
The GameCube has a large software library, and like games on the PlayStation 2 or Xbox.
GameCube. GameCube by Nintendo was the first time that Nintendo tried out a 6th-generation video game console. It was a successor to the Nintendo 64 and was released in 2001. The GameCube used optical discs as a primary storage medium, and the discs were in a mini DVD-based format. However, full-size DVDs and CDs could not be played, and this is where the competitors in the market had an edge. Online gaming options were rather limited, but the console boasted some high-quality games. The extensive software library was commendable, and with IBM developing the CPU, the games ran smoothly. This was the last Nintendo system that had strong third-party support, and this weird-looking device was actually quite handy. The world, however, was busy being a part of the cutthroat competition between Xbox and PS2. One of the things that we loved about the GameCube was how it had some of the finest first-party releases. This was a shot in the arm for franchises like F-Zero and Metroid. The lunchbox design was not the best asset, but you could ignore the designing challenge given the quality on offer. In fact, GameCube had a significantly low price tag considering that of the competitors. Among the wide array of games, we loved playing Super Mario Sunshine, Beautiful Joe, Resident Evil 3, and Luigi's Mansion.
If you were colorblind and had an IQ less than 12, then you wouldn't care which portable you had.
Game Gear. Portable. This 8-bit 4th-generation portable console was released by Sega, and the Game Gear had some tough competition to deal with in the market. From Game Boy to Atari Lynx, there were some stalwarts to beat. And yet, this was a console that we fondly remember. The hardware was very similar to the Master System, and you could even play Master System games using an adapter. The marketing was cleverly done to portray Game Gear as superior to the Game Boy, but the sales figures speak otherwise. It was cheaper than the likes of the Turbo Express or Atari Lynx, but there were some major shortcomings as well. For instance, the battery life was quite terrible, and there were very few original games for the console. Largely responsible was the hasty nature by which Game Gear was forcibly brought to the market. Sega did not provide adequate support, and it is no surprise that Game Boy emerged victorious in this contest. The Game Gear is somewhat big in size, and people had their own take on this aspect. We liked the full-color backlit screen, and the processing power that was unthinkable in those days. The game library included over 300 games, and although it was much less than the Game Boy, it was still a lot. Some of the famous ones were Sonic the Hedgehog, Space Harrier, the GG Shinobi, and others. A game called Land of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse was considered to be one of the best games that you could play on this console. Those who have experienced the joy of the Game Gear will know how it could have been a generation-defining console with the right support.
This giant beast is the Panasonic 3DO video game console.
3DO. EA founder Trip Hawkins headed the group that founded 3DO Interactive Multiplayer. This home video game console did not have the big guns developing it, but it still turned out to be a mean machine. The 32-bit custom CPU allowed promising power, and the console also had a sound storage system. It was one of the most hyped launches, and Time magazine had named it the product of the year.
The Panasonic 3DO FZ1 model was released in October 1993.
3DO definitely came up with cutting-edge technology that had everyone swooning. However, the price band was a bit too high. In a market full of cheaper competitors, it was tough to taste commercial success with such a high tag. Within a few years of its release, the product was discontinued, and the likes of Sega and Nintendo emerged victorious. But we did enjoy some very entertaining games. It was fun to play titles like Total Eclipse, Alone in the Dark, Star Control 2, The Need for Speed, Road Rash, and many others. 3DO also had some of the earliest first-person shooters like Escape from Monster Manor. There was a significant jump in graphics, sound, and game design that was appreciated by all the critics. In some aspects, the console was overhyped, but you had to appreciate the DMA engine. They had plans for a next-generation console, but this never materialized due to some technical issues. AMIGA CD32. This 32-bit video game console was developed by Commodore in 1993. It made good use of the traditional CD-ROM storage system and was based on Commodore's advanced graphics architecture chipset. In many ways, it was similar to the Amiga 1200 personal computer. You could use third-party devices and upgrade this device with keyboards, RAM, a mouse, and so forth. It was not a bad option when it first appeared in the market. In fact, the Amiga CD32 accounted for almost 38% of all CD-ROM sales in the UK. Commodore marketed it as the world's first 32-bit CD game console, and the system worked with absolute finesse. The 24-bit color palette offered some grand visuals, and the graphics were impressive. In the US, the CD32 was sold along with two pack-in games, Sleepwalker and Pinball Fantasies. Unfortunately, the maker company Commodore filed bankruptcy. The supply line was hit, and the products eventually ran out in the markets. This caused this console to be discontinued untimely, despite some good responses from the customers.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.